You are 7 years old. No cake, no candles, no day off. This morning your father hands you a rake and walks you to the field. Your childhood ends before breakfast. Age 7 marked a real boundary in medieval Europe. Canon law called it the age of discretion. Courts could question you. Guilds could bind you into an apprenticeship. Parents could send you to work in another household. Historian Barbara Hannawalt spent years reading English coroners' rolls from the 13th and 14th centuries. She found hundreds of records of children dying in ordinary ways, drowned in wells while fetching water, burned reaching into cooking fires, crushed under carts while playing near roads their parents worked beside. Children were rarely watched closely because the adults around them were working too, and work started early. In peasant households, a 5-year-old scared birds off the wheat fields with a wooden clapper. A 6-year-old spun wool by the fire. By 8, a child could carry water, tend chickens, weed the garden, mind a younger sibling. Nobody called this child labor. It was simply how a family survived. For boys born into wealth, the path looked different but started at the same age. At 7, a nobleman's son left home and entered another lord's household as a page. He learned table manners, horsemanship, how to carry a sword before he was strong enough to swing one. Around 14, he became a squire, training daily in combat, armor, and loyalty. Knighthood, if it came, waited until his early 20s. Girls faced their own version of this system. Canon law set the minimum age for betrothal at 7 and marriage at 12. Most girls from noble families were not sent to live with a husband that young. Marriages were often arranged on paper years before the couple actually lived together, but the paperwork itself shows how differently medieval society counted childhood. Education existed, but only for a narrow slice of children. Song schools attached to cathedrals taught boys to read Latin and sing the liturgy. Grammar schools in larger towns taught reading, writing, and basic arithmetic to boys whose families could pay. Girls of noble birth sometimes learned to read at home or inside a convent. Peasant children, the vast majority, learned no letters at all. Their education was the field, the loom, the workshop. Not every hour belonged to labor. Archaeologists working sites across London have pulled up wooden toy knights on horseback, miniature cooking pots, spinning tops, and clay whistles shaped like birds. Children played knucklebones with sheep bones polished smooth by handling. They played a rough version of football called camp ball, with almost no rules and frequent injuries. Boys were required by royal statute to practice archery on Sundays, shooting at targets called butts set up on village greens. A law meant to keep England's supply of longbowmen steady for war. Medieval law did not let age 7 excuse everything. Children as young as 10 appeared in court records accused of theft, usually small things. Bread, apples, a neighbor's chicken. Judges often showed leniency toward very young defendants, sometimes releasing them into a master's custody instead of punishing them like an adult. But a 12-year-old caught stealing repeatedly could face branding or worse. The line between childhood and adult punishment shifted from town to town, judge to judge. For a long time, historians assumed medieval adults barely noticed childhood as a separate stage of life. That idea traces back to a 1960 book by Philippe Ary. He argued medieval art and record-keeping treated children as miniature adults. Nicholas Orme, a historian who spent decades reading medieval wills, letters, and court records, pushed back hard. He found parents grieving deeply over dead infants, buying toys, writing lullabies, worrying about their children's futures. The evidence shows a society that loved its children while still expecting them to work. Roughly 1 in 3 children in medieval England died before reaching age 5. Fevers, dysentery, plague, and childbirth complications took most of them. Infants were swaddled tightly, wrapped in cloth bands from shoulder to foot, a practice believed to keep limbs straight and calm the baby. Wealthy families often hired wet nurses to breastfeed infants, sometimes sending the baby away to live with the nurse's own family for a year or two. Orphaned children without a guild or family to take them in often ended up begging in town streets, or taken in by a parish under a system of informal charity, long before anything like an orphanage existed. By 12, a peasant child was doing nearly a full adult's share of farm work. By 14, an apprentice bound to a London guild, an ironmonger, a goldsmith, a tailor, worked 6 or 7 years learning a trade, under a master who fed, housed, and disciplined him, sometimes with a stick. Records from the Ironmongers' Company in London show boys as young as 10 entering these contracts, legally bound for most of a decade before they earned a wage. Adolescence did not exist as a stage. Childhood was brief and working. Then came adult life, with no clear line between the two beyond the calendar. A 7-year-old carried real responsibility. A 12-year-old could be legally married on paper. A 14-year-old could be standing at a forge learning to shape iron. Medieval children were not tiny grown-ups without feelings. They were simply expected to grow up faster than we can imagine today, because the world around them offered no other option.